All right, awesome. We've got some really cool people who raise money from some really cool places. And to kick off the conversation, we got Brie Schmidt from Turnkey Reviews. Brie.
Hey guys, everyone coming in, take a seat. So today our panel is going to be talking about international fundraising. I'm going to have the boys come up. Reed, why don't you come up here and tell everyone a little bit about your background and your bio.
Hey guys, I think I'm the only international speaker at this event today. I'm from Australia originally. My name is Reed Goosens. I have a podcast that helps educate international investors about US real estate, and we're going to get into why people like to invest in the US compared to investing in their home country. I moved here 6 years ago for love. My fiance is American, former structural engineer, and now I'm the founder of RSM Property Group and a podcast host and enjoying my time here this weekend. So yeah.
David?
Thanks. I'm David Thompson from Austin, Texas, and I'll give you a little bit of background on international slant to me. So I went to international school at Thunderbird, got an MBA there, and met my wife from China, and that was my first foray in international. From that point on, I went into high tech. I worked for AT&T, Lucent, and Dell. Spent most of my time traveling around the world, so I've been to some really cool places like Istanbul, Delhi, Rio de Janeiro, solving trade issues. Left that role about a year and a half ago, answered an email from Joe that said he's taken on some serious students, and I was ready for a transition. So fast forward, I've been involved with 3 deals with Joe, raising capital for him and his deals. It's been an exciting ride. And I've got about 50 accredited investors now, of which a large segment of that happens to be through my wife's contacts, a very large Asian community. I've also got some investors from Russia and folks like that in the investments. So hopefully we can share some of those experiences that Reed and I have had in the international space and see if it can help you if you're looking to target those markets.
Yeah, and so like Ben said, the international investors that are investing in the foreign market is quite large. From Q2 of 2015 to Q1 of 2016, $85 billion was spent from foreign investors in U.S. commercial real estate. From 2011 to 2015, it used to be Canada was the #1 investor in foreign assets here locally, and then it's changed to China now. So I wanted to start off with you guys of why are there so many foreign investors? What is the allure to investing in the U.S. real estate market?
I'll take this one first.
No problem.
So my point of view is that I moved to this country 5 years ago. There was a lot of people wanting to invest here. Coming from Australia, the barriers to entry here in America, if you are sitting on the fence, know that it's a lot lower here in America compared to Australia. And one of the reasons that I find from coming from Aussie, we've got 24 million people. We're landlocked. We can only inhabit 18% of our land. So house prices are very, very high. Think of LA market all over the entire country. In America, you have your LAs, San Franciscos, New Yorks on one end, and you've got your Detroits, and you have 300 million people needing somewhere to live. So the barriers to entry here are a lot lower, and so cash flow is a lot more prevalent, and guys want yield. That's essentially what it is. So. You got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just add that it's considered, U.S. is still considered a safe haven, and probably even more so in the last couple of years. Because if you look at some of the countries hit by the drop of oil from $100 to $50 a barrel, that impacted Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Venezuela, Russia, to name a few countries that are very dependent on oil. Their currencies drop, making it more challenging to think about wanting to invest in those markets, right? Then we had Brexit, so some of even the tier 1 countries are having some challenges geopolitically. So I think the U.S. is still doing very good, and it's still a safe haven for people to want to invest here.
Yeah, I'll add one thing to that is some countries like China or other countries where investors are nervous about their governments taking their money. There's a lot of investors wanting to bring their money to a safe haven, as Dave said, to get it out of the reach of their government. So I deal with a couple of Chinese investors and also Indian investors, but they have restrictions, right? I know you were dealing with some Chinese investors.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll add one more thing to that. So the geopolitical landscape, and then you've got the economic landscape, and then you've got the country-specific landscape, right? So in China for now, they're having, the government's trying to curb what is like a real estate bubble. They're trying to curb that. So if you were accumulating property in China, it's now very restricted to keep accumulating property. As a result, that might make them more interested in investing in the United States, right? And there's also sometimes there's challenges with the government as far as how much cash you can actually send abroad. So if you're thinking about isolating a country, not only just understand what's happening globally, but specifically that country, right?
Right.
So I'm an investor from Canada, China, Australia. What are they looking for when they're looking at a U.S. investment?
The investors that I work with, they're looking for yield first and foremost. Secondly, they're looking to have, like Dave said, a secure, being invested in America is a secure market. And the third thing I've also noticed is that having an investment in US dollars, the greenback is the strongest currency, well, not the strongest, but the World Bank uses the greenback. So having an investment in US dollars is very, very important from what I've noticed in my investors.
Those are good points. I would just add geographic diversification, right? It's why you just don't all invest in Texas. Maybe you invest someplace around the country. Same thing if you're an investor looking at the world, where are the most attractive markets, right? And also currency diversification. If the US dollar is looked upon as being a stronger market with interest rates coming up, and you're in a country that has a little bit weaker currency, maybe you want to put some assets in the United States, right?
I'll also add one thing to that with the currency is that back in 2011, 2012, when the Aussie dollar, I think the Canadian dollar was with parity with the US, a lot of international investors were flooding the US market. Now that it's dropped off a little bit, I've seen a bit of a slowdown in that. But not necessarily, not everyone, it's just more the mum and pop investors. My bigger investors who already have invested here, they know they can get the cash flow. They want to keep going with the cash flow. They're addicted. It's like a drug.
Do you see them being attracted to a specific asset type? So are they looking for like the suburban single family portfolios or the commercial assets or the development, or what are you seeing?
I mean, it's a good question. I think, I look at this as far as I have a specific situation. There's a family where they live here in the States, right? And the husband works overseas in a factory. He owns a company. He wants to have cash flow for his family to live on. And if the country starts restricting, his host country start restricting capital to come here, he's going to look at investments that probably create cash flow. So apartments fit into that, syndication apartments, we're tracking a lot of folks into that space. I think some turnkey solutions might be another opportunity.
I also think that I see a lot of people whinging in the LA market that international investors come along and they're inflating prices, and they do the same thing in Australia, and it's again getting that capital out of their home country and just parking it somewhere where the government can't reach it. So I think you're seeing a lot more international investors becoming sophisticated instead of just parking the money, actually parking it and getting a good yield on it at the same time.
Are you noticing them going to specific cities or specific regions of the United States?
I think historically, and I kind of turn it around, like if I was going to invest someplace, I always think of the big glamorous cities, right? And I think historically that's been the case. So San Francisco, New York, Chicago, most of the coastal cities has been attractive for a long time. But as these markets have appreciated, I think some of the savvier international investors are starting to take a look at some secondary markets or cities they haven't looked at in the past. So I think that's gradually changing, although historically it's been the big cities, right?
I think it's depending on, you're right, the big cities historically, but now with more education, more platforms of, like mine with the podcast and educating people like Joe's, you start understanding that the yield is so important, and if they can get their money working for them in another country, in another currency, why not go and invest in a tier 2 city like Dallas-Fort Worth or Houston or Kansas City, or parts of Chicago and invest for cash flow.
Parts of Chicago, yeah. So if I have a deal that I'm looking for, right, I'm looking for foreign money, how do I attract those sort of buyers? Like, what are the steps, or how do I find them even?
Well, good question. Come talk with me. No. The first thing, I think you got to be specific in terms of what you want. There's obviously a lot of capital to be raised here in America from Americans, and let's not forget that. But the reason, if you do want to go in and have international investors come talk with you, there are a lot of companies out there that act as a conduit between the two. EB5 financing is a huge thing where they can have a visa program related to the financing from Chinese money, stuff like that. Just get educated on the space. Come talk to me or Dave afterwards, because we can definitely help them out if they're looking to get foreign money involved in a deal.
Yeah, I'm just going to add, I don't know if you do this, Reed, I purposely don't target a specific country. There's enough capital here. I mean, let's keep it easy and simple. Path of least resistance. But you might want to look at if you're raising capital, and Joe and I do this after every deal, it's one of our most interesting exercises, to look at where all your investors are. You know, for us, a lot of them are on the West Coast, East Coast, Texas. I'm in Texas. That's where I get a lot of my investors. But then when I start looking at the makeup of the investors, I find that they're the best source of referrals. You know, so if my wife's Chinese and we have a prevalent of more Chinese investors, they're a natural. They're gonna, as soon as they start seeing success with the projects, they're gonna be your biggest opportunity, and they're gonna start telling their friends and family members overseas, and then that's when we start getting into the discussions of how to invest in the U.S. The second way, I don't know if you want to get into that now, but the second part of that is how do we target, you could go after like a middle person, like if you say, well, I don't have those investors now, but I do believe, you know, this country is where I came from, I have a lot of connections at. You can work with a middle person, and I don't know if Tim Tam is around. Is Tim around? Oh, there's Tim. And Tim's not in this role yet, but we had a great discussion when we first came here about he lives in Hong Kong, he's investing in Atlanta, he's got like 20 homes, but he has contacts and friends, right? And if Tim came into our syndication on a deal and got some experience, then it's great. Because then he's more of a natural opportunity to go back to his friends and family members in Hong Kong. And I would say that's probably the best and most natural approach to get international investors. Would you say so?
And I think it goes back to what Joe said before with the marketing, word of mouth, and
Yeah.
the tags onto what you said.
Perfect.
And if you do have a couple of international investors who you seem to meet at these events, or meet someone like Tim who is a conduit between those countries, and you do well by those investors, it's going to be like wildfire, and it grows very, very quickly.
Perfect.
So, like, I have a business partner who's a U.S. citizen, and he took a job out in Italy for a few years. And so even though he was a U.S. citizen, it was such a pain with, like, the operating agreement and setting up bank accounts. I mean, logistically, what are some of the challenges when you're working with a foreign investor?
I'll take that one.
Yeah, that's a good one for you.
Part of my business is I help international investors get set up here, and there's a few steps that, you know, if you say meet someone from Hong Kong or China or India or Australia or whatever, they've got 100K and they want to invest it here. They're like, let's go. You pump the brakes a little bit. You know, ease up turbo, because there's a few steps you need to do, and some of the steps are, obviously there's bank accounts, LLCs. If you're a foreign investor, you need to get what's called an ITIN number, individual tax identification number. Then you need foreign exchange. You get your money into the country. So there's a whole system that I walk my clients through. Regardless if they invest with me or not, they still need to get that set up on the front end before they can start going and then looking at an active deal and start making offers and all that sort of stuff. So there is a whole process behind that, and it does take a period of time. And it takes a little bit of upfront capital, but if anyone is interested to learn more about that, I can definitely help them and talk to me after the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would just add that I find a lot of my investors have worked in the United States before and hence had a social security number. So if they have a social security number, you can check with your CPA. They can go check online to make sure it's still active, and they don't have to have the I-10. Oftentimes, they still maybe have a U.S. bank account or had some family members here. They might still have a bank account available. The only thing we might also talk about is it's highly encouraged that even if they invested $50,000 or $100,000 here, to file taxes. Okay, so you know we provide. I know Reed does the same thing. A U.S.-based CPA, if they're used to working with international clients, the better, to help facilitate a simple return, which is a K-1 coming from our partnership once a year, and filing that. And you say maybe that's not much money, and maybe most of the time you get a paper loss, but the CPA will tell you in 5 years when you sell this asset, they'd have 5 years of paper losses to offset the gain, right? So it's highly encouraged to file the taxes. It's not hard. We can facilitate someone doing that. But that's kind of the three key things, right?
The one other thing that international investors get stuck up on is they will need to have a CPA in their home country as well. It's not just the American-based CPA will help them with the American taxes. Their exposure in their home country, highly advised to have advice back there, because you're now in if you're in Australia, you go into a global income pool, and whatever you earn in America, you've got to report to Australia. Whatever you earn in Australia, you've got to report to America. Blah blah blah. So if you are investing in foreign countries, there's some rules and regulations. I'm not an attorney, a tax accountant, but please go, advise your clients to talk to a home country tax advisor, and we can connect you with people here, CPAs here.
Great point.
Yeah, so outside of the logistics of, setting up the ability to purchase properties here, is there any other differences when dealing with a foreign investor versus a U.S.-based investor?
Like that?
Yeah, I'll give you my example. So when I was traveling internationally quite a bit, has anyone ever heard of International Living magazine? Anybody? Okay, a lot of hands. That's interesting. I don't know what you think about the organization. At the time, I was really, they would advertise all of these cool development projects all over Latin America. And I was traveling to all these places. I'd take a weekend and go check out these things. And I was plunking down different money here and there, and got into 3 different developments in different countries. And my experience with international, there's definitely language and cultural communication challenges that can come up. I bought a property in Brazil, and they only communicated with me in Portuguese. I could, and I even, got some CDs in Portuguese, and I did the whole thing because I was traveling to Brazil so much, and I was really frustrated. And that sounds kind of simple, right? But I'm thinking, U.S. should be in England. It's U.S. business, right? Or U.S. language is the international language for business, but it wasn't happening here. So. Just make sure if you're dealing with someone coming into the U.S. that they're really, typically most people are pretty comfortable with the U.S. language, but if that's a challenge for them, like when my wife and I meet with another couple and they're from China, I let them go in Chinese for a while, because they wear each other out and they've really connected. And then I'm like, okay, when do you need me? Because I think it really shows respect, and it shows, and so if you can facilitate some of that, I don't know if you have to have a translator, but that could come up. But think about when you're a global citizen, when you're out there talking to people, try to get out of your U.S.-centric viewpoint and really touch, Joe coaches me a lot, it's the relationship, right? So, and if it's international, think about the different relationships you can have with people, language and cultural, kind of taking some time to learn that might be kind of cool. If you're gonna focus on China, go take some Mandarin, go do some research on the country and the culture, things like that.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing. I had I can't remember where he was from. There was an international guy. I had to explain to him what a title company was. He had no clue what it was, because in his country,
that's a good point.
Some countries don't have title companies, and he thought I was lying, and what am I paying this title company for? And he's like, it's okay, it's needed there to facilitate the process, and blah, blah, blah. But to your point, and I think you hit on a very good point there, once you get out of that US-centric mindset, I'm from Australia, I've got an outside point of view coming to the US. Once you change your mindset about the world is global, it's very easy to connect with international money. The world's your oyster, and in terms of raising capital, in terms of communicating with people, and if you can add a little bit of language in there, I think that would go pretty smooth, right?
Even when you did an interview with me, you said, what were some of those acronyms you used?
Kraken.
I'm a good bloke.
He's a good bloke. He's a good bloke.
I can just say y'all. That's about the only thing I could say back to you.
So has anyone here been in Costa Rica? Like, amazing. So I went to Costa Rica 9 years ago, and I wanted to buy a vacation home in Costa Rica.
Right.
And then I learned about squatters' rights.
Yeah.
So it's something like if someone else occupies the property for 6 months, they legally own it. So as far as investing internationally, as a U.S. citizen, what challenges do you foresee, or what other things that people should know about?
I like Jeremy Roll yesterday. I think I go a long time on that topic because I've had 3 pretty interesting experiences. We talked about language, culture, just communications. There's you greatly increase your risk, especially if you're investing internationally in more of an emerging markets. You definitely increase your risk. You have currency risks that you may have not thought about. I invested in Brazil. There was a 1-year strike on the project, and they never got the people back for a whole year on a development project. You have just different things going on, some rules and regulations you don't expect to happen. Currency is a big issue. The economy is like when oil went down. Man, if you were investing in I was investing in Ecuador on the ocean with some partners, 12 acres right on the ocean, beautiful piece of land. And, they had the oil crisis, the economy tanked, and it was just, we were trying to sell that property. Well, who wants to locals? No one's going to buy it. It was just too expensive, I'll even go so far as saying they had an earthquake, and okay, we handle. I was in the Northridge earthquake in California, and structures are built to handle earthquakes, and in some of these countries that can disrupt infrastructure in no time and take a long time to recover. So you really need to know where you're going to be investing in international. If you live there and you have family on the boots on the ground, you really researched it, I tell people most of the time, just go vacation there. Yeah. Enjoy it, and enjoy Costa Rica, have a great time. Be careful of signing up on property deals and things like that, because you just increased your risk this way, and You know, like we can show you apartment deals. We're getting 10% cash on cash and 20% IRRs all day long, right here. Why do you got to go do that? You know. So my experience going in emerging markets is a much different ball game than maybe investing in the U.S., where it's a little bit different, more stable market.
And I'll add one thing to that is that now that the American dollar is so strong, I've actually got some American investors who want to go invest either in Canada or in Australia. And because I'm from Australia, I have teams on the ground there. To Dave's point, if you are going to invest internationally, and I tell this to all my international investors, you need your team on the ground. It's so important to have a boots on the ground, team on the ground, people that you trust. Part of my show and investing, the podcast, is to educate those people about who is credible in this country, because there's so many sharks out there. It's real estate, let's face it. And if you don't know who the right people are to work with, you can get the wool pulled over your eyes. And just work with good people. I think that's the biggest thing.
Okay. So with the recent administration change, how do you think that will or won't impact foreign investors investing in the United States?
That's a great question. My experience is the people are very invested with Joe and I. They're going to keep investing. They've seen success. They're going to keep investing. I've had a couple conversations with people who are new to us, just hesitate. Not that they don't like the deal, just I want to wait 6 months, want to kind of see how things kind of unfold. So that's what I'm seeing.
Yep, I'm seeing something similar. On the smaller mum and pop type investors, yes, there's pullback. On the bigger guys, like, you know, who've had experience or they have larger capital in deals and they've seen the success, they haven't had any issues. I've got some Israeli investors that are looking to move capital over, and it's just, you know, business as usual. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So in general, what type, like, advice or tips would you give someone on raising capital, foreign or domestic? Because you guys do both.
Right. I think, for me personally, it goes back to the marketing thing, creating a platform, becoming a key person of influence in your sphere, whether it's just, you know, with your friends and family, or creating a podcast and all those other great things that we talked about earlier. Really being a thought leader in that space. It goes back to marketing, and Joe's taught me a lot about it, and I've taken that on to create books and stuff. And if you can be an expert in your field, in your niche of raising capital, whether it be from foreign investors or domestic investors, you're going to have success. It may take a while. I'm definitely one that's taken a long time, because I didn't go to college here. I didn't grow up here. I've got mates who are raising capital because they went to USC and they've got all their buddies, and I'm sort of having to start from scratch and build up that platform. But just really focus on becoming a key person of influence if you want to start raising capital. Brand yourself well, and take yourself seriously, because you are a business. People are investing you first and foremost, and maybe the deal probably second. You know, the deal's got to make sense, but it's really about you and the trust that you instill in those people.
Yeah, good. I would just say, I kind of said it earlier, is look at your natural pool today, whether that's prospects or current clients, and just say, where is it flowing for you? You know,
Yeah.
For me, it's natural. My wife's Chinese. My wife just flew to China. Lots of connections that way. Well, how can I take that further? Okay, I can get on a plane and go see Tim Tam. And I call him up, Tim, let's go have a meeting. I'll go to Hong Kong. It's worth it for me. He's got a lot of good connections. It's worth it for me to go that way. I could take a book. So Joe's good on thought leadership. So I did an interview on raising $1 million in 2 weeks. It's a free gift on the WOA. Why not translate that in Mandarin? You know? There's little things I could do to keep, if I'm blogging, if there's we do on a thought leadership, sometimes I blog too long, and my assistant Deanna just says, shouldn't that be like a special report? I said, probably right. So she'll make a special report out of it, and, you know, may have a couple of those a year. Hey, why do I like apartments? Special report. Translate that into Mandarin, or the language of the culture that you're targeting. Maybe do a trip over there. Maybe we use a middleman to set up that in advance. If you really want to target a specific country, I think that's how I would go about it. Referrals is the best way.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And both of you guys have written books on this topic and raising capital. So with the WOVA app, you have access for 6 months, right? So make sure that you check out their profiles on there so you have access to their books. I think we're going to open up to any questions that you guys have. The question was, any thoughts on the Vancouver tax and how it's going to change things?
Can you explain it? Mm-hmm. Oh.
You're seeing a lot of that just be redirected to Seattle, where now that's the number one.
Got it. Makes sense. I mean, that would only help us, right? If we're
Yeah.
doing deals in the U.S., it would only help us. Haven't seen too much of that. I think we're up for lots of different things going on with the new administration. Just kind of keep our eyes open on how things evolve and what we can use to our advantage and what we have to be careful about. Some countries restrict capital, and China is restricting capital flows, but at the same time, they're restricting opportunities to buy more properties. So if they can figure out a way to get it here, which they do, if they're the number one country sending dollars here, they're figuring out a way to get it here. So.
And I'll add one thing. I didn't realize that was a tax that had come into Vancouver. I think that's only going to benefit our deals that we do in apartments and more capital is going to be pouring into this country.
Maybe we should go put signs out.
Yeah. We will accept your
it's a great place to visit, by the way.
The report that I read said that up until 2015, Canadians were the #1 source of foreign investment. And then Q1 2016, the Chinese investment was quadruple that of Canadians. So I think maybe that might be changing the dynamic and creating more pools of money to come in. Any other questions?
Good question. I know there's a Regulation D person coming up next. I know there is a regulation, and don't quote me on this thing, it's S for Sam, that if you just do international investors in your private placement, don't quote me, but I think rule of thumb is that you keep the accreditation working, but talk to your attorney about there's a Regulation S that is for just international investors, and I'm not sure how the accreditation works. In my rule of thumb is I always keep the accreditation rules on everyone, regardless of where they're coming from. So.
Can I just say, I'm actually asking that. So, Regulation S is right. I don't know that much about it, but I can say that you should always check with an attorney that raising capital for into a U.S. deal.
Yep.
And you guys have experience with this. Tends to be lower liability than you taking an accredited investment.
Yep.
Yeah, both in terms of recourse, but I really can't explain all the details, but
Yeah, if you guys didn't hear him, what he basically said was talk to an attorney. Regulation S is what you want to ask them about, and that taking foreign investors' money actually might be less of a liability than taking a U.S.-born accredited investor's money, correct? Is that what you're saying? So it has to be only foreign investors in the pool without any U.S. investors, okay?
Yeah.
When you guys started raising money for your deals, what was the one thing that you focused on improving from maybe your initial conversations or some area where you struggled to kind of make that sale or get the buyer's confidence to invest in the deal?
I think personally, for me, it was personal brand, but then having the solutions to the other questions that come up for international investors. What am I going to do about bank accounts? What am I going to do about getting my money here? And having that the A to Z for them in-house was very, very important for me, and being educated on that process, because to say to them, oh, I can't take your money because I don't know how to open your bank account for you, well, I've just lost money. So it's really, really important to be educated on all the steps and processes for an international person to get their money here most effectively and easily and without major headaches for them, because that you want to make investing with me personally easy, and straightforward. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Dan, when you're talking about just international, just in general capital raise?
Also in general.
Okay.
In general, yeah. I mean, just slight improvements all the time. I didn't ask for referrals in my first deal. I mean, people just got in the deal. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. As this evolved, Joe and I looked at the metrics. I think, Joe, on your deal is about 25% referrals, kind of 20, even 30, maybe even higher. I'm not in that percentage category yet. I look at repeat investors as a major indicator for me, so I'm at about a 30% rate repeat investors. I love that. That requires little or no effort. It's an email, I want to do this, and very little conversation. So that's the beauty of capital raising, is that, as Joe was saying, just gradually every deal I get more investors, that base grows, and the challenge of capital raising gets easier. Getting started is the hardest, but the best thing I did was hire Joe as my coach and leverage his deals, because I think in my book and what I talk about, the number one thing is credibility and experience. Yeah, credible as a person I was. I know people that know me as a credible person, a good person, but what has he done in apartment space before, right? I just left Dell. What's he doing? Is he doing, multi-level marketing? What's he doing, So I think, there's opportunities for improvement on every step. And Dan, I can't speak to anything specifically, but, I would encourage you to go for it.
The one thing that I'll add to that, being a younger person raising capital and maybe not having 20 years of professional experience, is really, really taking yourself seriously as a professional. I talk about, professionalism is huge, and making that changing that mindset. I was a structural engineer. Everyone thought that I was a structural engineer. What are you doing? What are you doing in real estate? Like, what the hell is this real estate? But being professional and branding yourself correctly is very, very important to start having those conversations. And then also setting the right mindset and saying, okay, I need to have 100 conversations, and I may get 2 investors. At the beginning, it's going to be that, from my experience at least anyway. I don't, maybe for...
Yeah, same thing. It's a numbers game, but you get better. You get better as you do it, making sure your marketing materials and the things you discussed. First of all, making sure you got a good deal. I was like, market, deal, team. That's it. A market, deal, team. You got those 3 things, and I educate people. I don't feel like I'm ever selling or marketing. I'm passionate about what I'm doing, yes, but when the investor looks at the deck, it's got to be a nice, logical flow. They come to their own conclusions. You just answer questions, move them on to the next step. If they're ready to go, that's fine. If it's suitable for them, great. If it's not, you've educated them, and they're grateful for that. They've learned something. And one thing I was telling Reed about was, and I think you got the same experience, 95% of my first-time investors have never invested in an apartment before. I mean, come on, they're accredited, but they just never know this exists. You folks know this all exists. You guys are way ahead of the game. The average person, even if they're accredited and a savvy business person, don't even know this exists for them. Don't even know storage exists for them. Don't even know mobile home parks exist for them, right? Your job is to educate them, line up with the right deals and markets, and explain how this works for them, and how this makes sense for their portfolio. Simple as that.
Well, thank you guys for sharing your experiences. If you have any more questions, you can ask them on the app so that we all can see them and they can answer back to you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Baby call.
Good job.
Good job. Sorry,
Thank you,
my
Brie.
hand was
That was nice.